Hello, everybody. How are you today?
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well.
Hello.
This is Danya,
I'm Brian.
and
And
we are here on Genealogy Adventures, and we're here right now introducing to you guys Eunice Buffington. Hi, Eunice. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Hello, family. I'm Eunice Buffington, the family tree buff.
That's awesome. So Eunice is actually related to Brian and I, but she has a lot of experience in researching the migration. And so we're going to talk to her today about that. And we hope that a lot of people will be able to be a part of that. And hopefully, as always, learn something new, get some new information, just really kind of push forward on to help you move forward on your research.
Absolutely. So, Eunice, we are just so pleased to have you on the show because, like I said, you have an absolute wealth of information.
Thank you.
So, the way we like to open up the show is if you'd like to spend, say, 4 or 5 minutes, kind of talking about your background, your areas of research, and kind of what was it about genealogy that kind of grabbed you and really sucked you in?
Okay. I started my search in genealogy. I started looking for my great grandfather, Asbury Buffington. I spent 27 years in the Army, and while in the Army, a Caucasian soldier asked me, "What did I know about my name?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What do you know about that name, Buffington?" And I was really embarrassed because I didn't know anything about the name.
Mm-hmm.
But when I retired from the military, that question came back to me. Like, what did he know about this name that I didn't know? And so I was in a master's course, and I was writing a paper. And in that paper, we had to do a familygram, enneagram, and you had to trace your family. And so that prompted me to start finding out about my great grandfather, who I knew was a mulatto and had been brought to Marshall County, Mississippi from Hall County, Georgia. So that I knew. And it was said in the family that he had some connection with the Cherokees. That's all I knew. And from that's what got me started. But what I found was so interesting that I had to keep going and keep going and keep going to connect the dots. And then DNA just opened up a whole different world. And so what I found was that my great grandfather was part of the Buffington family that migrated came from England all the way down from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, Edgefield, South Carolina. When it was the 96th district, Joseph Buffington stayed and lived there when it was the 96th district, which was part of Lawrence, Spartanburg, all those different counties now. But at that time, it was all one huge county. And he lived there in the annals of the slavery. He sold slaves. They bought and sold slaves. And so there's a book in Edgefield, in the lineage in Edgefield, that lists that if there was a slave that was documented, it documents that slave and who that slave was sold to. And so that starts the lineage of those seeds being transported, because a lot of them were sold to the Coxes, to the Dugans, to other people who came to Marshall County, Mississippi, and bought those enslaved people and bought that blood to Marshall County, Mississippi. And so I have traced those. I've been to South Carolina to the archives and traced those roots all the way back. But what I found in tracing my ancestors, I found the trauma that they passed down from generation to generation, not only in the white families, but in the Black families. And it's just a cycle of trauma that's passed down that started actually before slavery, but in the United States, it is the absolute crux coming from slavery. And so my thing is connecting the dots. Is to not only know those 780 cousins on DNA, is to understand how I'm related to them and to connect those dots and understand how we're related around the world. And that's the white, the Black, the African, the Irish, to know how we're related. And in knowing that, we kind of understand that we are really all one big family of different colors, all in one tree.
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
we
We definitely have a we definitely can connect there, especially with Edgefield. You know what I didn't say? I did not wish everyone a very happy Mother's Day.
Yes,
I'm a
happy
mom.
Mother's Day.
Happy
Yes,
Mother-
I'm a mom, and my daughter brought me a drink, so that's what y'all see. It's just it's not bad. It's nothing, but that's what. Happy Mother's Day, Miss
Happy Mother's
Eunice.
Day.
But we're here, and I just want to make sure we wish everybody a happy Mother's Day. So go ahead, Brian. What were you about to say?
So my first question to Eunice was the Georgia connection with your ancestor. Was that something that was kind of relayed to your family orally, or was that something that had popped out to you in a record that you had accessed?
It popped out to me in a record. So the first record that I looked up for Asbury Buffington, he was in Hall County, Georgia. And so the name Asbury was just different. You just didn't find a whole lot of Asburys.
I know that name though, but yes, you don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Ezekiel, but even worse than Ezekiel, Asbury. And so he was in Hall County, Georgia. There was some tinkling that he did not come from Mississippi. We knew he didn't come from Mississippi. Right. And so learning Hall County, Georgia led me to go to Hall County, Georgia and do research there in Hall County, Georgia and connect the dot. And oh my goodness, when I was growing up, it was my sisters in school, there was just 5 of us. And if there was a Buffington anywhere, they were related to me, and they were Black and they were related to me. I went to Hall County, Georgia, and there was Buffingtons everywhere, every color. And that's when I knew that I had went to where my grandfather had came from, and I had taken him back to his roots where he came from. Yeah.
So this is what I find really, really interesting, because whether it's my mother's side of the family or my father's, my direct line always stayed in place. So it's not like they were being sold downriver. It's not like they were taken downriver, with the exception of Moses, who we were able to trace from Virginia to North Carolina. But when you're kind of working blind in that way, it's when you finally realize, oh, well, my origin story is actually outside of the state or colony my ancestors living in. What kind of research strategy did you come up with to try to move that story back in time?
Well, it started with census records. Census records that identified where they live. I used census records. I used archives. And so I would go to the archives in that location. A lot of times the archives that we find online or what we find on Ancestry, you can find more when you go to the location. And so that helped me a lot, because most local libraries have the local history of that town, the people who began, the early pioneers of the town. That may not be in another book that you're looking for online, but it's in the library in that local town. Small little book about the origins of the original people that came there. Those things helped me. And I have built a library of documents, census records, interviewing, talking to other people to build that repertoire.
Okay, and your ancestor, was he kept within the same enslaving family, or was he sold at some point and then taken to another state?
On my Buffington line, he was kept within the family. And so it was much easier to trace him. He was kept within the family. He was bought here with the white Buffingtons. They live next door to each other. They're on the census records together. He was given land from them. So it was easy to trace him back, because if you trace them back to where they came from, then I could trace him back. On my Robinson line, my great-great-grandfather was sold 4 times. And I have documents where he was, different places that he was sold, but he also had part in Lawrence, South Carolina, which was at one time, part of that 96th district. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so on my Robinson line also come from there. So that bloodline, Buffington and Robinson, Buffington on my father's side, Robinson on my mother's side, came from South Carolina in that 96th district and migrated to Mississippi. And so there's a big, when I first did my DNA, I had so many DNA matches that I had no clue how we were matched to that was in South Carolina. Where does all this South Carolina people at? I even went to the family reunion, the Calling Out Breakfast family reunion. I'm going to find my people to find out how we connect.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. She ended up coming to the reunion. So we have questions for you. I'm not asking questions because I kind of know Eunice's story. And so Brian is really kind of getting in because Eunice and I, because she came to the Calling All Branches reunion, she and I talked a lot. So we know I know her story. I know what she's doing. So I'm really kind of letting Brian just kind of ask these questions, let him get them all out. If I think of something that I don't remember, then I'll go ahead and do it. But I know, huh?
If I can just jump in really quickly before we take an audience question. So Eunice, you were saying that you found for your Robinson ancestor, he had been sold 4 times.
Mhm.
That you were able to find records for each one of those sales is a miracle, because we know how difficult that is.
Yes.
I just wonder if you could spend a little bit of time talking about what those records were and where you found them.
Okay, on my Robinson side, Martin Robinson, I DNA matched to the Garrett line, LaBrenda Garrett, and I could not understand. I was tracing. I did a Y-DNA for a grandson of Martin, tracing that line, and I matched all LaBrenda Garrett's and her brother, her father.
Oh wow!
LaBrenda wrote a book. She did a book about her family.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, she mentioned she had the slave document records where her great-great-grandfather had been enslaved. Enslaved with him was my great-great-grandfather, Martin. He was enslaved with Jesse Garrett, but Martin kept his name. He was sold. Jesse Garrett put in his will when at my death, sell Negro man Martin. Martin was then sold to Thomas Hinton. And so tracing those records, going to the courthouse and tracing those records back at the courthouse, those slave records, those documents, tracing those records back, I was able to find the will. I was able to find the will of Jesse Garrett, that it had that in there, and who he was sold to. And so I was able to trace to him to Thomas Henderson. It appears that my great-great-grandfather ran away when the Civil War began, because he was in the Civil War. The Hendons and the Robinsons were Confederates, and so he was on the Union side. So it is my expectation that he ran away,
Right.
when the slavery began. But I was able to find those documents with DNA. I was able to trace those documents and go to the courthouses and find slave records, the probate records, and census records to prove that those things.
So okay, so now I do have a question, because this is stuff that we know things now that we didn't know 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Garrett line.
Mm-hmm.
I remember meeting LaBrenda, and she does mention you on the comments. She says that the two of you are related. She had already said it. And the thing is that I remember meeting when I first met LaBrenda, I think I was talking to her about my Elijah Fleming story.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything. I didn't know too much about the Garretts, but now let's fast forward 2 years to now, and I know a lot about the Garretts because we have another cousin who's doing Garrett research that you will need to meet. Her name is Yolanda Grimes. She has gone completely back on them, and I mean way back, done excellent work on them. So both you and LaBrenda need to meet. But here's the kicker: Yolanda has pointed out to me, because I remember you and I talking, we just did not know where we possibly crossed that. Talking with Yolanda, I think it's going to be through the Garretts, because I have at least 3 different Garrett marriages on my tree.
Or the Robinsons.
The Robinsons,
yeah.
No, but
and
for
then
Dunya,
you mentioned Henderson, and I'm like, wait a minute, because that takes us back to who? Moses Williams.
That's why we relate at Dunya, Moses Williams. So Perrin, of those slaves that were sold in Edgefield, Abner Perrin bought from Mary Buffington a slave, Narissa. And that line, that parent line, married into your Williams line.
Okay, but see, parents married into the Yeldales, honey.
Okay. But that's still your line.
But it's still my line.
Right. And so that's where
they did all of that. So
that's where my bloodline that comes into yours is that parent line. That was a slave that was sold, a Buffington slave that was sold to parent. Once one of the white parents impregnated one of her ancestors, her descendants, and there our line comes.
So, okay, very quickly, I'm going to go to the producer because according to some of our watchers, there are some audio issues. Afiba, do you know anything about that?
No, everything seems good here, but I'll stop it and I'll reconvene it on the live stream on Facebook.
Okay, so everybody, he's going to drop it, and then I want you to stop and then give it a minute and come back on so he could try to make it right. All right? So we're going to do that.
Before dropping out, because you're fine now. I think it was your audio. It started to lag, but you seem to have come back.
Mine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because they were saying audio issues all around. They didn't say me.
Oh, okay. All right. But will we be able to get back into this live feed? Because then we're
not us. He's gonna. What you gonna do, Afiba?
Yes, I'm just starting a live on Facebook. Over. That's all.
He's just starting the Facebook Live over. So you guys drop out for a sec, and he's gonna start it over. Okay, go ahead, do that.
Yep. Give me 1 minute.
Do we need to leave?
No, we don't have to go anywhere. He had to he just has to restart the video on Facebook.
Okay.
It's like being on CNN. They're having all kinds of issues at the minute. So yeah, I didn't realize we had all of those surnames in common.
No
idea.
Oh my goodness. we have to have a whole nother show on our common surnames. I mean, I've really
reshare.
Went all the way back and able to connect a lot of find out a lot of our connections.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're back on live on Facebook.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. So go ahead. So yeah, that is something else. I didn't know that we had all of those. I didn't know. And it's so funny what 2 years can do.
Right.
It's so funny what 2 years can do, because I swear to you, I don't remember, we didn't know.
So Donia, you have some questions from the audience, I believe.
Well, you actually asked the question. That was the question about the records.
Okay, about the records. Okay.
It was about the records from the audience, but now the audience is coming back in and they're saying they're back up. Okay. So now I have to reshare to all of the groups that I just shared to. So we're sorry about that guys.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, well, actually, this is a good question. What was it like the first time that you started going into those estate probate records? And you would, for those of us who've been using them for a long time, for me, it was really, really jarring seeing a list of items like teaspoons, silver spoons, wooden mixing spoons, like an axe, a shovel, the female mule called Dolly, and then you get human beings.
Then you get Negro girl Sally, Negro boy, Negro man.
How did that? I mean, what was your reaction to that the first time you saw it?
It was actually heart-wrenching. The first time I must say it was heart-wrenching. Even though I'd read about it, it was really heart-wrenching when on my great-great-grandfather Martin Robinson, to see his name, to actually see his name listed as a slave belonging to somebody. That was so heart-wrenching for me. And so one of the things that slavery did, it produced a lot of trauma. A lot of trauma was produced in slavery. Just the act of beating somebody, just the act of the sexual abuse. And that trauma, and through my research, is what I've found is what's passed down generation after generation after generation after generation. And just that lynching, that the young guy that got killed, that's trauma. That's lynching. He was lynched. They just used a gun and not a rope. But that trauma came from slavery, and that ideology that you can own somebody, that you're better than another person, came from that trauma that came from slavery. And so if we don't go back and peel it back and own that and understand where that came from, we'll find all our people in our tree and still won't have the answer.
So you're saying we. What do you mean by we? Who is we?
Everybody, as humanity. Yes. It's not just awesome. Black people. It's not just
white people. That's right.
It's Native American. It's humanity. It's humanity, because that trauma was passed down, not just to us. We got a different view, but that trauma, the trauma of taking your child to go to a lynching, and that child sees that child breathes that in, that trauma is passed down to that child, so that child thinks that it's okay to do that to another person if that person did X, Y, Z. That trauma is passed down generation after generation. So one person in the family may see, I would never do that. I would never be involved in that. But one person in the family may say, that was okay, that we went to that lynching, and that ideology is passed down. It's passed down.
There's an American academic and researcher by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy, who's done intensive, just long amounts of research on what she calls post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Or disorder. She does PTSS and PTSD.
But it's basically that trauma, in terms of people who are descended from slaves, is actually hardwired into our DNA.
Yes.
Which is why we have such an aggravated kind of flight or fight response, because we know that our lives literally depend on it. But just piggybacking on what you just said, in 2008 in London, she basically asked this mostly white audience these questions. She's like, so when the slave master sold your baby, and you knew you were never going to see it again, did he provide you with counseling, or a social worker, or a psychologist, or a counselor? She's like, when he lynched your husband because your husband tried to stop him from raping you, did you get counseling? And she just ran down all of these scenarios, and she's like, no, we had to go inwards and channel that strength to be able to get through that. And she even went further to say, your children saw that too.
There we go. That's what I was going to say.
Yes, that's where the trauma, that's where the cycle of passing that trauma down. Yes. Not only did her children see that, the slave master children saw what he was doing. So the trauma is not only passed down to the enslaved, the trauma is passed to the enslaver.
She used it's a famous picture of 3 African Americans being hung. And she used that picture. And when she used that picture, everybody saw it, and she was like, this is one of the pictures that people just, they know, but it's still hard to look at. But then, she told the people, you see the people. She said, but now I'm going to take you deeper, because what you're looking at, all you see is the 3 people that are hanging. Then she says, I'm going to take you deeper. And this might not have been in the London one. I can't remember, because she did too. I followed her ever since that. But she took them deeper, and she scrolled into the picture, and you saw a child. And then you saw another child. And then you saw another child. And she was like, y'all didn't know that they were there? These are babies that are watching these particular things happening. And what's not taught in school, and what we as genealogists learn, is that at these lynchings, at these particular hangings, because I'm going to say hangings, because Webster's dictionary says that a lynching is when someone is killed without legal representation first, without a legal trial, something to that nature. It's like that. So a lynching doesn't necessarily have to be a hanging. And that's what people need to understand. That's why when you made the comment about the young man that just was killed back in February, and it's now coming out, his father said it was a lynching, and it was. It really was. When you look at the definition of what lynching is, it was a lynching without any doubt. But the thing about it is that with that picture, she went into another detail that genealogists know, but it's not taught in schools, is that after the eyes are bulging out, after they're losing their bowels, after all of the things that happen to them when they're young, they then use those people as target practice. And they take pieces of them home. So these babies had to watch these guys and women shoot these folks so they could take a piece of them home.
Take fingers, ears, souvenirs.
Exactly. How does anyone think that did not traumatize a child? Most definitely. Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna lay back now. Go ahead. I'm gonna take the sip because.
Well, I was just going to close this one out to kind of bring a little bit of genealogy back into it. This is particularly unnerving to me because both me and another researcher, Martine Brennan in Ireland, and we've got a little research group in, I've forgotten her name, Kaylee as well. You know, we're researching the Weeping Time people, and that includes Glenn County as well as McIntosh County, where, you know, that's where Glenn County is where the young man was actually lynched. So, you know, we're going backwards in time, you know, stretching to the period before the Weeping Time, finding the original Africans who were shipped into South Carolina. So, you know, it's in the back of my mind going, you know, Ahmed could actually be a descendant of the very people that Martine and Callie and I are actually researching.
That's right.
That's kind of really hit us on a whole other level. So I just kind of wanted to close out with that. So the whole thing is very relevant to me.
Wow.
Now, in terms of your ancestry, your enslaved ancestors were just shipped. It just seems everywhere.
They were.
Because you also had enslaved people who were in Oklahoma.
Yes.
How did you stumble across that tale? What records led to that discovery?
The Dawes Commission, all the records in the Dawes Commission that record the Native Americans as they were when they on the Trail of Tears, when they got to Oklahoma and they were trying to establish themselves, they set up the Dawes Commission. And so I was able to trace my ancestors in that record because through DNA, I knew that one of my DNA matched cousins who lives in Oklahoma, his ancestors came from Hall County, Cherokee County, Georgia, which was all that part was part of Cherokee land. Before the Indian, all that was part of Cherokee County, part of the Cherokee Indians had that land. And so I was able to use those records, again, census records, maps, the Dawes Commission records. There's another rolls, the Drennan rolls, to document my family in Oklahoma.
Okay, and how did they even get there?
They were forced to walk there. They were actually forced to walk there on the Trail of Tears. Many died on the Trail of Tears, and so in there when they were questioned on the Dawes record, some of them told of their trials and tribulations on the trails. So some of them told that, some of them in their tribulation, they told that I had a child that died, that my grandmother died as walking on the Trail of Tears. And so you're able to put together the story by those little pieces, that somebody died and that they had to leave her. And that they had to, yes, right. So you're able to pick up the trauma. That's trauma. You're able to pick up those pieces of trauma just in reading their stories that the grandmother died and they had to leave her. They had to bury her under a brush in a shallow grave and leave her.
So have you, the people that you've connected to via DNA, even though you've connected to them DNA, have you figured out how you've connected to a lot of them DNA? Like, do you know who the common ancestor is with most of them?
Absolutely. That is my ultimate goal.
That's all of our goals.
That is my ultimate goal every time I make a connection, is to find out how we're connected. And not only to find out and me know, is to let you know. And so I let that person know how we're connected. Now, whether they indulge in it, whether they want to be involved or not, that's up to them. But I will say we are DNA matched. We have DNA blood, and we share DNA blood from. This is our common ancestor. And I've had a lot of positive, very positive response from all my ancestors: Cherokee, Native American, white. I've had positive response
So
because
have you
I
had
documented it.
Have you had any negative?
I had people who didn't want to know. They wasn't negative to me. They just didn't want to know. And so I sent the information. That I never hear from you again. That you lock your tree down after that. Those people who are not ready to know. And so I understand that. I accept that. And so I haven't had any. They come out and say anything negative. They always want to know, do you have any proof? What is your proof?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's when they all of a sudden become, 50-year, experienced geneticists. Well, you start hearing, well, autosomal, not reliable, not accurate. Like, oh, okay, it's accurate for you, but when it's us making a connection to the family, all of a sudden it's not particularly reliable. I wanted to ask you questions just as an example. So say for instance, I discover I have an ancestor who's enslaved in Texas. And I'm looking at the 1870 census and it says, Martha Ann was actually born in North Carolina. What advice would you give someone to try to figure out to push her story back into North Carolina and possibly find her people there?
I always start with the census records, because the 1870 census, as genealogists know, that's a pivotal census for us. And so if I can find them on the 1870 census with any, and just that one line carries so much information, what kind of work they did, where they were born at, where their mother was born at, where their father was born at. And so using that information, it's like being an investigator. If their father was born in North Carolina, then you look for that surname in another state, maybe. And so I use, it's almost like being an investigator. And so you use whatever bit of information that you have to reveal the next bit of information.
Okay.
And I use that with documents, and I support that with some kind of document that supports that information.
Now,
So go ahead, Brian.
So in your family during that time period, say, ancestors or family who were born between 1830 and like 1850, do you also find that did your family use like a naming convention? Were children named after specific people within the family?
Absolutely. I did find that. And if you're not a genealogist, you don't even think about that. You don't. I did a story it's called "Names Matter." Naming patterns matter. And so, some families had an actual pattern of naming their children. So the firstborn child will be named after the mother's maiden name, and those are ways you can use. I use to find people, because if I could cross-reference the maiden name and a surname, so I did find those patterns. I did find patterns with the daughter being named after a grandmother, and those naming patterns. Yes.
Well, I've even found some naming patterns actually indicate some sort of a religious link, because we share common enslaving Quaker ancestors.
Okay.
So even if I'm in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and I'm seeing, especially for mulatto and Black people, names like Charity, Hezekiah, Mordecai, Ezekiel, Elijah, I'm like, you have a connection to the Quakers. I could almost eliminate anyone else, and I'm like, what Quaker families are living in that county, and where did you come from?
Especially Ezekiel. Ezekiel is very, very common in my Buffington line, Buffington and Harlan line. Ezekiel Buffington, yes.
So one person, because there seems to be one person up here other than LaBrenda and now Yolanda, because they both want to talk to you. There's another woman by the name of Latifah Joyner Williams. She wants to know if you have a tree on Ancestry.
I do.
And DNA.
I do. I have a public tree on Ancestry. It's called DNA Matches under my name, Eunice Buffington. And it's a huge tree. That's the tree that I have all the matches to. And so yes, I do. I also have a tree on Family Tree DNA. And I have about 20 people that I've tested on Family Tree DNA and about 15 on Ancestry. And so I manage the DNA kits of at least 35 family members.
Wow. So another question was how much does land records show you? Which Brian and I have a whole lot on that.
It shows a lot. It shows a lot. Initially, I was thinking that my great-great-grandfather did not have lands. And a lot of times we think that our ancestors did not own land. But
Right.
those land records was able to show not only what land they own, where they got it from, where that land came from, where it was transferred from, and then then if you follow the record, who they transferred to. It may be their sons, their daughter. It may be a child that you didn't know, you didn't see in the census records, but the land was transferred to that child. And now you have the name of a new child that you didn't see somewhere else because you were able to track that through those land records.
Mm-hmm. And also, again, talking about the enslavement of people, you have a Black or mulatto ancestor who all of a sudden is getting a couple hundred acres of a former enslaver's property.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a biological link there that you may want to dig into.
To investigate, yes. Yes.
Well, you have a couple of new matches right on this thing because King Cooley says DNA matches. Came across that one today. We share ancestors in trees.
Okay. So, I'll be looking for you.
Yes, as always, our guests are always welcome to peruse the comments, and if they have something that they want to answer a question that we may have not been able to get to, they are welcome. And as Eunice, you are welcome to go on there and see whatever they are, so you guys can probably connect up, and that's awesome. As Stacy Marshall Mobley said, land records are amazing gems, and that they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
they are.
Because we're the same, and we see two people like around 1870, 1871 with the same surname, but we've never seen them connected in any way, shape, or form, but they're living next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You start looking at the names of their kids, and it's like they may not be naming children after each other, but they're clearly naming children after a common ancestor.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So have you ever found a doppelganger family? And what I mean by that,
white and black ones, I have literally white and black families with exactly the same.
Oh, I know you and I did. Oh, I know. That's what I was asking her. Have you found that
with the same names? All the same
most
names?
Definitely. We've come across a family, a black family and a white family, not only with the same names of the mother, the father, the children, but also birth years almost identical.
Wow.
So, I'm wondering, because that you are definitely connected to the White Buffingtons, have you ever come across almost a doppelganger type family?
Not as close as a doppelganger, very, very close in similarity, whether you see some of the similar names.
Okay.
And those help me identify naming patterns that this got to be a family that I'm looking for, that their same names are repeating themselves. But I have not found where there was a exact same name there. Not like that.
Yeah, we
Wow.
You will. You're in Edgefield. You'll find it. You'll find it.
I guess in terms of this conversation, I would think that the ones that would be the most challenging to research are infants and young children who were sold into the deep South away from their parents.
Yes.
Because I'm only going to assume that no one would have told them who their parents were. They may not have even told them where they came from.
Where they came from.
Where they even came from, exactly.
So I'm just wondering, I haven't come across that in my research. Have you come across that in yours?
Yes, I have. And only through DNA was I able to find how we were DNA connected, and it was through a child, and that's on my Robinson line. A child was sold from William Moore, sold to Josiah Robinson, a young child slave named Tempe. They transported that slave, Tempe, to Tishomingo County, Mississippi. Tempe had several children, One of her children had children by William Anderson Robinson, who was the son of the enslaver. I have now DNA matched to all of those, to those, and been able to make that connection. It was through Tempe, who was sold as a child.
Wow, wow. So another question was asked earlier. Do you spell Robinson? How do you spell Robinson?
It is spelled different ways in different trees for different people. Roberson, Robinson, Robertson, same family lines, just a different spelling of the name. And it depends on the location, it seems, as to how they spell the name.
Because Roberson, the Erson, I tend to see that for whatever reason, I tend to see that in North Carolina.
North Carolina, absolutely.
Northern, Halifax, all around there. Yeah.
Yes.
Another question was, where did it go? I just lost it. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, I thought you had another question.
I did. I can't find it. It just disappeared on me. I did. Oh, here it is. Martine asked if she wanted to know if you had found any matches in Canada.
I have not. Not that I work with. And just keep in mind, it's 820 matches.
Okay.
So not that I have worked with. There may be a match in Canada. Now, just that question will make me now check and see.
I'm seeing Brian is going to ask the question that I was getting ready to ask, because we're always on the same wavelength. So go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was going to say on Martine's behalf, Martine is my research buddy for the Weeping Time. If you find that you have any matches in Halifax, Nova Scotia, please get in touch.
Okay.
Well, Brian wasn't thinking what I was thinking. He was helping Martine. So I'm going to go a different route. Have you ever uploaded your DNA to other places like GEDmatch, MyHeritage, and things like that to help you find other families?
Yes, absolutely.
So are you on GEDmatch?
I'm on
GEDmatch. Not GEDmatch, MyHeritage.
I'm on MyHeritage, yes.
Go to MyHeritage, because they are really, really good with the international. You get a lot. I think I have more international on MyHeritage than I do on Ancestry.
Okay.
So check that one. You might want to check that one.
We'll do. Sure will.
And in terms of your Mississippi ancestry, again, it's not really an area that I've done in-depth research in. Are you finding things like freedmen labor contracts?
Yes. There was actually a concentration camp in Mississippi. Corinth was one of the concentration camps after the Civil War that they set up. And so there's a wealth of freedmen records that I have used to trace my ancestors. Yes.
Okay. Because I was going to.
And church records, freedmen records, and church records. In the African American community, especially right after slavery, the church was the way we disseminated information, and so those initial church records are a great way to find out where our people were, where they came from. Yes, and so I use also church records.
Great.
Yolanda Grimes said, "Have you?" And this is actually a good question. And Brian, we need to. I don't think this has ever happened. I don't think I've ever had this happen to me. She said, "Have you ever come across a sibling who was listed deceased, but by a slave parent on a freeman document, but the child was not deceased?" Because I've never had that happen.
I haven't. No.
I have not. And the child was listed deceased. I have not. No.
Like a hiding of the child almost.
Right. Yeah.
Or I guess if the child was sold away, and
they didn't know anything about it. Yeah.
Right.
They got word through the grapevine. Oh, really, really sorry, but they died without actually having the proof of that.
Right.
That maybe.
Because again, that's the heartbreaking thing right after the emancipation is all of these parents looking for their children and all of these people looking for their parents.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest things for me, was to look through the newspapers right after emancipation and just to see all these wanted or lost or trying to find
their families. Yes.
Yeah, those were definitely something else. They were Yeah, those were something else. Stacy Marshall Mobley, she asked, how much should we trust family folklore? I find it to be somewhat true in many cases, but not usually 100%. So I'm gonna let y'all go through this, and then I'm gonna ask, because I have a certain feeling about this particular question.
So I'll start first, and then I'll let Brian jump in. I give some credence to family folklore. Had I not listened to that, my great-great-grandfather did not come from Mississippi, I would have been stuck researching in Mississippi. And so that came from family folklore. He was dead long before I was born. It was family folklore that he didn't come from here. So that led me to say, I got to look somewhere else to look for him. So and family folklore said that he was a mulatto, that he was mixed. I never seen a picture of him, and then looking at my skin, I would have never thought he was mixed. So I have to put some credence in family folklore. Then I follow that up with some document to support that.
Right.
So some of the folklore get pushed out because it ends up, I can't find anything to support that. And so that is just folklore. I didn't find anything to support that. But then some of that becomes our factual history, our family history.
Right.
That I can create. Yes.
Right.
I've got two quick ones. My mother's father, we grew up hearing he was a big burly Irishman, Patrick Turner. So come to find out, okay, he wasn't African descended. My great grandfather was indeed European, but he was Jewish, not, Jewish from Belarus, not Irish. So that was an interesting one. Something that was true that we believed to be false. My father's mother insisted that her family had Native American, and we were like, yeah, Granny, all right, we're all Native American. Come to find out, she was right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, I have a certain feeling about this because, and the reason why I have a feeling about it is because there are stories that have been passed on in my family. Not a lot of stories, first and foremost. It's not a lot of stories, but there are some. But when you start to find or prove, because this is why I came up with genealogy is like geometry. You have to set your hypothesis, and then you have to prove your proof. And the hypothesis is that folklore. It is said that so and so is so and so and whatever. Now I have to prove that that is correct or wrong. My issue with the folklore is that if I prove it to be wrong, please don't get angry at me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I proved it to be wrong. Those are that I have a really big issue with that, because when I'm finding out, because my family is so secretive and so kept to themselves that right now we have a story that's going on in our family, without saying any family name or what have you, that we're just meeting a whole bunch of members, and some people are still holding against us something that we didn't even know.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of their trauma.
Well, I mean, I would say that, but this is something totally different. This is a family who were children of someone, and because they were children of someone, we only knew one of the kids. And that's all that we knew, was one of the kids. We didn't know that that person had a whole nother set of children. So now here we are, fast forward. This might have happened 50 years ago. And now here we are, fast forward, and I'm finding these people. And you have folks that still don't want to meet us because they're holding on to that particular type of anger.
Mm-hmm.
That crushes me, because I don't know you, and I didn't do it, and I don't know you, and we have to somehow fix that. We have to somehow close that gap, because this is why African Americans have the issues that they have now. We hold so much against each other. We don't even know why.
You're right. We don't know why, because we never address where it came from.
Yes.
We never can get to where that anger comes from.
Yes. It's just,
it didn't even come from us. It comes through us.
Through us. That's it.
It's not from us.
don't forget, for centuries, we were not allowed to express emotions, specifically negative emotions.
Right.
Right.
And
Because
when
if we did, something would happen. We would get hurt. We would get beat. And again, that just goes back to all of the different things that are going on with African Americans now, today, because we're always to blame as to why we got hurt. It's our fault. We did it. It is this young man's fault. And I'm sorry, I'm going back, but it is this young man's fault that he was killed because he didn't stand there and let a retired police officer and his son coming at him with two guns. He didn't stand there and let that happen. He should have let that happen. Right. These are things, these are reasons. This is why, in my opinion, a conversation needs to be had. We need to talk. Meaning African Americans, white Americans, need to literally sit at that table, have that discussion, figure it out.
No, everybody.
Native Americans, just everybody.
Yes.
Latin Americans, they all need to figure it out. I think I said those two because, not saying that they have the biggest beef, but just saying that because throughout American history, white Americans were the superior. They're the ones that taught the history that's being taught to all of the other races right now. So it needs to be fixed. Like all this just needs to be fixed. It's time for it to just stop. It needs to be fixed. They need to. Everybody
own
needs
it. That's what you have to do.
And it has to be owned. And until
to change anything, you have to own.
Yeah, Okay, we're gonna give it off for that because I'm like extremely. I'm trying to figure out the best way for all of us to get to that point where we can talk about, because I'm tired. I'm like, this is over the top, and I'm angry, and I think I'm angry because I was reared in a different way. And not only was I reared in a different way, I was around people who were a different way, both black and white. I had a principal who made sure that while the race fights were going on at the other high schools, he was like, not in my house. You understand what I'm saying?
But I think as genealogists, all of us, including our audience, we have a different perspective because we get the history. We get that father and his son chasing Ahmaud Arbery down the street were slave catchers. There's no other way to describe those two men as other than acting as poor whites who thought they were better than blacks because they were slave catchers. They had the authority to tell everyone to black bodies, black and brown bodies. I see it. And I have examples of that from our ancestry. We can tick off the names, we can tick off the dates, we can tick off the scenarios. And I think what really pains me, I can only speak on my behalf on this one. What pains me is it's no different than 1815, 1835, 1878, 1715, 1968. It's still happening.
Right.
There's always an excuse. Always.
Yeah, it's always, and that's what I said. And when I wrote my little note on Facebook, and I wrote my note, and I'm like, I need you to point out to me what's the difference. That's one of my main questions. What's the difference? And I made sure that I said between, because for some, like you said, for genealogists, we can take it back. And this is black, white, Native American, whatever, whoever it is, whoever's doing research, they can go back and they can see that there is no difference, that there is no change. Or not there's no change, but they can see the repetitiveness of it. That's what we as genealogists can see. We can always find that repetitiveness of these different things. But those who don't do that research and only go by the teachings that is given to them in schools, it is the earliest time for them is going to be the civil rights movement. And that's when they see the hose being splashed on the African Americans, and depending upon the races that you're talking about. I'm talking about African American race. So that's when they're going to see the hose being splashed, the dogs being pushed out. That's when they're going to see that. And I made sure that I said, and for those, I'm talking about civil rights movement, because that's the earliest for you that you could say something. So where do you see it being different from that point? That's a huge thing to me, because the civil rights movement was not 100 years ago. You understand what I'm saying? It wasn't 100 years ago. Was it 50? Was it 75? I mean, I'm trying to, I can't get the math right now in my head for it.
Well,
but it was
put it this way. I was alive.
How about that?
I was so that that the latter part of it was well within my lifetime and well within my living memory.
Okay. Wow.
I know I got a bunch of people out there going, "Damn it, how old is he?"
I would like to leave something with the audience, a hypothetical question that I like to leave to the audience. Hypothetically, would you have killed, would you have hit, would you have abused, would you have sexually abused, would you have hated, would you have maimed a person of a different color if you'd known that person was blood related to you, just a different color? And so if we think about that hypothetically, if you had known that that was your great, 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 great grandmother's descendant that you killed, shot, raped, maimed, whatever the negative connotation is, would you have done it if you known that was your relative?
Can I put it in? Can I put it just a tiny addendum to that?
Sure.
Or would you have also spoken out?
Hey.
It's
okay.
it's
Right.
the indifference. As I'm going to say this, and I'm going to probably get just a heap of abuse, but I'm going to say it.
I got your back, cuz.
I almost have more respect for a racist or a white supremacist who stands up and says, "I am a racist. I'm a white supremacist," because I know who I'm dealing with.
Right.
It's the people who, well, it's none of my business, doesn't affect me, keep my head down, the indifference.
That's right.
I'm not saying nothing because I don't want to cause any issues. That's the group of that. I think that was always the larger group of Americans, and that's the group that I have the issue with.
Okay.
Because most of them knew that it was wrong. Whatever happened, they knew it was wrong. Didn't speak out.
Didn't speak up. Yes.
Well, we have one cousin named Tommy who I haven't seen in a while. Hey, Tommy.
Hey, Tommy.
Yeah. Tommy Gary said he answered your question, and in his opinion, he said some people still wouldn't care because of the moral hate. And he's right. There are some out here that will look at me, even though they're my cousin and we are of a different race. They're looking at me like, no, that's not my cousin. I don't care what you say.
And so that's what I think we have to go back a little bit farther to go back and peel back why you feel that you're so different that you can't even acknowledge that this is your blood person, a person that's blood related to you, because they look different than you. Because that's the only thing different. We look different.
Right.
Yeah.
We watched, as everybody knows, next week's show is going to be freaking awesome. Not that this one isn't, because this is a good show too. But next week's show is going to be really great. So Brian and I have been doing research on Jane Elliott, and one of the things that he and I have been talking about is she did and I think we had this discussion. Was it with Eunice as well? Who was it that we were talking to? We were talking to somebody else. No, it was Tiffany Huntsman.
Oh, yes, Tiffany.
We were talking with Tiffany, and we were discussing how Jane Elliott had done her Brown Eye, Blue Eye project in Britain. Now, or over in Europe. Now, Europe is a lot more, from what I've been told, susceptible to African Americans. They don't have what we had. They don't have that same type of outward problem that we had. But when I was watching this one particular one that Brian had sent to me, the problem is there. It's underlying. And you had people that walked out because they were like, you know what, I don't have to go through this. I don't have to stand for this. We don't treat people like that over here, and I'm not going to do it. Then you had those that were like, well, I'm going to stay, but I don't. It's not going to affect me any. I don't get anything from it. And that's the group that I want to talk about. This one lady who was a teacher, she was so pissed. She was like, you're mistreating me. She happened to be the blue eye. So she was being mistreated. And she was like, you're mistreating me because of, my eye color. And we don't do stuff like that. And we don't this and we don't that. And that's not how we do it here and blah, blah, blah. And then they go to lunch break. And when they go to lunch break, she actually had the nerve to sit and talk with some of the people from the blue eye because she didn't like how they were only given sandwiches while the brown eye people were given this lavish lunch. And so she's talking, and she talked about a little black girl, beautiful little black girl who had fallen and scraped her cheek, scraped her skin. And when she scraped her skin, she was like, oh, I was very shocked that it was pink, but you don't need it. How you gonna be? How do you sit here and go through? Oh, we don't do that here. We don't this. We don't that. Blah blah blah. I don't know. Maybe I thought it was black. She was pink.
But there's a lot of people out there like that. There's a lot of people who get shocked when they find out that African descended people can get sunburn.
It just blew my mind. That's just like saying that my blood ain't red like yours. You know what I mean? That's what it was saying. My blood is not red like yours. You peel my skin back, you wouldn't be able to tell me from the next person. You look at a skeleton, you wouldn't be able to tell if that skeleton was black or white or native or Latin or what have you, unless you had someone who studies bones. That's the only way that you can tell that was an African American, a European, a native. That's the only way, because they know something different is there. But you wouldn't know it any other way. So please do not come and tell me that because I scraped my skin, you thought my skin was going to be black underneath it. Like, y'all, I'm on a whole nother level when it comes
because I have a feeling we're coming up to time. I haven't seen the FIBA flash us any minutes now, but I have a feeling we're getting up there. So as Donnie has said, next week we are being joined by Jane Elliott, who did a very famous brown-eyed versus blue-eyed. She basically, it was such an inventive way of doing it.
Yes.
She didn't teach racism. Instead of separating people by skin color, she did eye color, blue-eyed, brown-eyed. And to say that the blue-eyed people came out of that with a whole new kind of level of, well, not all of them. Many of them came out of it with a whole new worldview.
Right.
Basically, the blue eyes were treated like non-whites, brown eyes were treated as whites. And it's Revelation, 4 p.m. next Sunday. She's going to be here. I can't promise that all of the language is going to be family friendly. I'm just going to put that little... Jane is very plain speaking, which is what we love about her, which is why we really wanted to have her on the show. As Donnie,
yes, let's warn them.
as Donnie's favorite saying is, she does not hold any cut cards.
Yeah. So you might catch a little slip of the tongue, a little cursing every now and then. It may come out. I'm not saying that it will, it might. So don't be shocked or surprised, because it just might. But I'm trying to tell y'all that I am so glad that Eunice joined us, because she's given up. She's dropped some extremely awesome gems. And Eunice, you and I, some stuff now that we didn't know 2006, in 2018.
Right, yes.
So you know how we connect. You get it. So hey, cousin. All right. We knew we were cousins.
Kind of for life.
We knew we were cousins. We just didn't know what it was, but now we do.
Now we do.
And I'm so glad to hear that. And that's the way you're saying that you relate to me is the same way that you relate to Brian.
No.
Well, that's one of. Yes, it is, because Brian is connected.
Donnie is a Harlan too.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. You got to understand, Brian and I connect on 8 different lines.
Okay.
So it could
have been any one of them. Okay.
It could have been anything.
Okay.
anything, trust me. But
I have absolutely loved having you on the show because again, your research just covers so much and it's
yes,
so extensive. And it just covers so many different groups of people in so many different parts of the slaveholding South. I I could easily talk to you for about another hour. Just on that
yes,
alone. Because again, no matter where you're researching, each region has its own kind of character, it has its own set of records, it has its own set of challenges and
Mhm.
barriers and bonuses as well. So it's been really wonderful talking to you and finding out about the kind of records that you use, your kind of go-to places, the strategies that you've developed that you've made work for you. So
yes.
it's been really such a
Thank
pleasure.
you. I've enjoyed it.
So really quick question before we sign off, Eunice, is there information? Do you have like a website that people can contact you with? Do you or just what are your contact? Do you have any contact information to
I
share?
do. I do. I do. I have a webpage, familytreebuff.com. That is my personal webpage. It has my blog, and a lot of the the research that I've been gathering is there, part of my blog. I have a YouTube channel, Family Tree Buff, at youtube.com. That's my YouTube channel. And you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter,
And it's all family tree buff.
all Family Tree Buff.
Well, I've already put the website up there, and we'll make sure that we get all of the other information up there. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all for having me. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed talking to Cousin and connecting with Cousin and putting it out there so that we can continue to find our ancestors and sometimes and break some of the cycle of generational trauma that's passed down from generation to generation as we find our ancestors and go forward. Thank you guys.
All
Thank you.
right.
Enjoy.
So, okay, goodbye, everybody. We love you. Have a great,
Bye.
happy Mother's Day. Enjoy your day. Treat your mommies great. Treat your mommy daddies great because sometimes daddies are mommies as well. Just like sometimes mommies are daddies. So, handle your business. Take care of your family. I'm Danya.
I'm Brian. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
And I'm Eunice Buffington, the Family Tree Buff.
Bye, everybody.